it's getting to be that time of year. It's getting to be cold out, even here in Philadelphia, where, as you know, it's always sunny. And we at the Geiger house, knock on wood, have been nursing along an old furnace. That part of having an old furnace in your house is that when winter comes up, you've always got to take a little time for maintenance. So we always have the heating guys come over and clean the furnace out. It's a natural gas burning furnace that heats water and goes through hot water radiators, and it burps the radiators and gets everything ready for winter. And
did you say burp as in B-U-R-P?
Yeah. So what you've got to do is you put some extra water in the radiator, then you go to the furthest radiator away from the furnace, and you let the pressure out until a little drop of water comes. Then you've got the perfect amount of water in your radiator system.
Oh, I see. It's like getting air in your veins. You don't want to have any air in your radiator. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and you want to have that perfect pressure and everything, because throughout the year you lose a little bit of water through different ways. So, they burp the radiator, and is it just me? I'm always really, really antsy when there's people doing work in my house. I am not a handy person.
God, Brad.
I'm not handy. I'm not useful. I can barely drive a nail, but I feel like I should be doing something.
I find myself saying stupid things like, "Can I get you a bowl of water?" or what can I bring you?
Water, like he's a husky. Can I get you a bowl of water?
Because I'm like I suddenly become the most socially awkward person. Like, can I bring you a screwdriver? Like, it's a handyman. He's got a screwdriver, Dave. What are you doing? Can I sit awkwardly in the room just adjacent to this one with my hands on my lap?
Well, that's just it. You don't know whether to be in the same room or an adjacent room, because you don't want to be too far in case he actually does need something, or if she has to say, "Oh, geez, could you turn on the electricity or turn off the electricity or help I'm being shocked," or whatever. You want to be around, but you don't want to hover. And if you are around, you feel like you got to say something, and I don't know what to say.
I find myself doing things like, well, it's time to check up on him, but I don't want to look like I'm checking up on him. So, here I am bringing in this piece of paper into the room, as I always do every 2:43 p.m. every afternoon.
Yeah, you want to say, "Hey, do you need anything?" But you don't want to say, "Do you need anything?" in the way that means, "Are you done yet?" And I'm trying to rush you, because you don't want to rush the person out either. One way or the other. I even get nervous, and this is my Midwest. If the neighbor across the street is raking or sweeping, we don't rake. We don't have any grass. It's just sidewalks. But if they're sweeping their front stoop, I feel like I've got to be out there sweeping my front stoop, because otherwise I'm the neighbor that's falling behind. So I feel like and God help us if the neighbor's having roof work done. I feel like I've got to be melting tar on the roof. It's a really bizarre headspace to be in.
I wonder if it's a form of egotism that, like, they start using their lingo of like, well, yeah, that's going to be your valve is off. And I'm, the valve. Sure. I suspected it was the valve. I find myself doing the same thing with my doctor. I'm like, Dave, you don't have to pretend like you know heart shit when he starts talking about the heart. Like, sure, it's a blood pressure issue, is it? Okay, well, all right, yeah. Like, Dave, you don't have to know this. You don't have to pretend that you know this. You could be naive.
Ironically, I went to my heart doctor. Turns out my valve was off.
And on that note, I'm going to turn on the valve and say hello, everybody, and welcome to Comic Lab, the show about making comics
and making a living from comics. I'm Brad Geiger, the editor of webcomics.com and the creator of Evil Inc.
And I'm his pal Dave Kellett, cartoonist of Drive and Sheldon and co-director of the documentary Stripped.
And this week's hour of comics advice is made possible by your support at patreon.com/comiclab. So Dave, let's talk comics.
Let's talk comics, my friend. I'm excited to fire up these mics and talk with you today. I feel like we haven't spoken in a while, so this will be a fun show.
I know.
And just a reminder, when you join us on Patreon, you're also going to get over 300 episodes of bonus things that we've recorded called ProTips, which go out exclusively to our Patreon pals. And those include things like Writer's Room, where you see Brad and I try to break down and rebuild up a joke or construct a comic strip from nothing. And the ProTips, which every week bring you actionable advice that you can use in your own cartooning. And in addition to that, you're going to get access to the Discord server, which is pros, pro-ams, amateurs, all sharing their best practices, best tips, and best advice for one another.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, I was just checking out Discord before we fired up the mics today, and there's a great conversation going on right now. There's actually two conversations. One person is getting a Kickstarter ready for February, and they're feeling a little bit antsy. They're not feeling like they've got everything under control, and they're pitching ideas, and people are giving this person really, really good feedback on the Kickstarter that they were planning. And another person is coming in and saying, am I wasting my time on Twitter? I feel like I'm shouting into the void. And which, by the way, a very common feeling, and a very intelligent, thoughtful, actionable conversation is built up around where we stand at social media right now.
Yeah, I saw that this morning. Yeah.
And it's just, I can't tell you how proud I am of that Discord server. It really is, when you get a bunch of people who are talking about this topic at a certain level. Right. They're just not flybys. They're just not, as people that popped into a Facebook group that don't know what they're talking about. All these folks are operating at a certain level, and you can have a much more intelligent conversation that way and get a lot more better advice.
Absolutely. So patreon.com/Comic Lab, and we will see you there on the server. So Fred, let's talk about, I'm preparing to prepare for the changeover into 2024. And I want to tell you, as a topic this week, that this time of year gets me oddly excited, because I love the idea of taking stock, as we're going to do probably on a future episode here, taking stock of how the year went and then planning for the future. But I also love the idea, you know how some people declare email bankruptcy, where like, I got 1,000 unresponded emails that I just have to declare bankruptcy and say, if I haven't gotten back to you, I can't have that guilt on me. I'm deleting my inbox. You can start over again. And I have to say, the changeover in years, I like to do a little something called organizational bankruptcy, where I kind of start fresh. I love the idea of everything is a blank sheet. Like, it's a brand new wall calendar. It's a brand new magnet board in my office, for those of you that know that I use this magnet board. And all my plans are fresh. All my planning is fresh. And I even try to take stock of what systems I use are working, and what ideas behind those systems can be refined, can be changed, can be tossed out completely. Am I the only one that has that idea of organizational bankruptcy at the end of the year?
It's the first time I've ever put it into those words, but I do admit, when it comes around to January, you're getting on top of it much quicker than I do. Usually,
well, you know why? I ordered my calendar. That literally was the whole way. Yeah.
I got to make fun of myself here. I always preach on this show about not getting fetishy about this stuff. Like, people always say, what kind of pen do you use when you're writing in your sketchbook? And I'm always like, don't get fetishy about this stuff. It's a pen. It makes a mark on a piece of paper, because I especially, like, if you're doing final art, okay, I get that we use a particular pen, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about, like, brainstorming. People have asked, what kind of pen do you use when you're brainstorming? And I reject that, kind of, because if I don't have that pen, does that mean I can't be creative? I don't want to walk myself into that area where I can only be creative if I have a Pilot G2 07 for that nice thick line. But having said that, this year I got a planner, as I do every year. And every year, the damn thing sits there blank until the year is up and I throw it away. This year, my planner has been used all through the year, and it's for the dumbest reason you could ever imagine. It's hardcover. And I take it more seriously because it's hardcover. Now, how stupid is that? It's got, you know how your books have the little ribbons that help you keep the place in the book?
Yes.
It's got 2 of those. It's a very good planner in that it had not only the calendar days, but it's got every week. It's got 2 days with like rules, like college rules, like you did on paper that you'd use at school.
Sure.
It's got 2 of those for you to keep notes in for the week. It's got a really dumb thing at the beginning of the month. What did I learn this month? Which I always skip because I learned very little. But some people might use that. And I got all the way to November. I'm looking through it. It's got marks on almost every page. And I realized that I took it more seriously because it was hardcover. And I'm so ashamed to admit it, but it's absolutely true.
Well, no, don't be ashamed of it, because part of why I want to talk about this today is that we are creative people. And sometimes to have the commitment day in, day out, week in, week out to cartoon requires setting up creative systems, not just plain old boring systems, but like creative ways. And so I love the idea of a fresh start every year, because we can say, hey, what worked this year that I did in terms of the systems behind the systems? Yeah. What do I need to put my creative weight onto to see if I can come up with a better way to force myself to do, or not force myself necessarily, but to remind myself, to nudge myself to do all the things that need doing. And if having a hardcover book did the job for you, great. Yeah. And for me, it was about 5 or 6 years ago when I figured out that magnet board system, where if I don't get a job done that day, the magnet moves to the next day. And then I can also use dry erase, because it's a dry erase magnet board. So one-off jobs like, doctor's appointment 9:30 on Thursday, or, get Kickstarter launched. I'm not going to create a magnet for that, but I will handwrite it in. That system has worked wonderfully for me. And for you, I know you got a desktop, I'm going to say it's about 12 inches by 9 inches, a dry erase board that sort of has your daily tasks written on it, kind of in a bullet journal type format. These systems are great. Like, you have to experiment every year with trying to get a little bit better. I do worry about the fact that I'm going to get really good at it when I'm 85 and then like, wham, drop dead. I'm like, well, I got my systems in place.
That'll be on your tombstone. Yeah. I finally got organized. Yeah, I actually, whiteboards, I actually have kind of fallen in love with those. And I don't know whether it's been the fact that I've been teaching and I use them a lot. I've actually got 2 whiteboards, tabletop whiteboards that they're different types. One of them actually is built to go right behind your keyboard, and one of them is built to be a little stand-up. And I use them for different things. One of them has like my monthly items that I do, down not only monthly Patreon items, but monthly bills that I can check them off as I'm paying them so I don't lose track. And then the other one is what I'm posting on Patreon as I'm posting it, so I can make sure that I'm keeping up the volume that I expect for myself. And I got to tell you, between a hardcover calendar and 2 whiteboards, I've gotten better at this. And I'll tell you what else I've done, just in terms of organization, that I've gotten much better at: writing stuff down in the moment and not trusting that I'm going to just remember it.
I've
gotten a little bit obsessive about writing stuff down because, like, I've got these great ideas. I had a great idea that I realized that I had back in June. I didn't write it down, and of course I forgot about it until it popped around again. I immediately wrote it down because I'm forgetting all kinds of stuff because there's so much to keep track of, right? Yeah. So I've gotten better about writing stuff down too.
Well, and so little side note here on whiteboard technology. I love whiteboards. I love my magnet whiteboard. I love writing on it. I a little bit feel like every whiteboard pen that I've ever bought, and I've bought a lot of different brands trying them out. They all kind of feel like, okay, remember when you were a kid? This is going to be a bit of a walk in terms of a conversation. Remember when you were a kid and you had a Dixon Ticonderoga #2 pencil? It was great. The eraser erased great. The lead was perfect inside. I know it's not lead, it's carbon, but you know what I mean? The lead wrote great. The eraser worked great. The pencil felt great. But then every once in a while, you'd get one of these like promotional pencils from your dentist, and the eraser didn't do anything other than smudge in a really unsatisfying way. And the lead felt waxy, for lack of a better phrase. It didn't really write in a satisfying way. Yeah. That's kind of where I feel whiteboard pen technology is. It always feels like a promotional dentist pencil where like nothing quite writes as well as, like, has no one figured out whiteboard pen technology yet that it works?
It's amazing. It's so good and it's so bad at the same time. I mean, it's so bad that it's very smudgy. You got to be very careful not to smudge it because it's not very, it's not permanent, obviously. But it's also amazing in that if you ever accidentally use a Sharpie on a whiteboard, a permanent marker, do you know if you take your dry erase marker and color over it, it'll erase the Sharpie?
Yes. It's bonkers.
It's amazing that something can be so so great, so involved, so amazing, and also just it's the things that you want to do right without smudging, it still can't do.
Also, I've now gotten to the point of whiteboard technology where I'm buying the spray to spray on my eraser.
I've got 2 cans of that. Yes,
that
one for at home and one for school. Yes.
I now have 17 accessories for my whiteboard, but yes. This is where we are. Anyway, so I basically wanted to say, though, that in these weeks leading up to November and December, it's fun I like the human desire for renewal at the new year. Yeah. And I know we're going to have a show where we review what we set out to do in 2023. That's always fun. And we're going to talk about, the week after, we'll talk about our 2024 goals, right?
Yeah. Fun for you. It's fun for you. You've done the things you set out to do. It's always a mea culpa for me.
No, Brad,
I didn't do these things again.
Brad, your Kickstarter went great. Don't beat yourself up.
I came so close to getting it off the ground. Can I just I'll tell on myself again. I came this close. Two things actually thwarted my Kickstarter this year. One of the, because I'm still really nervous about the after effects of COVID and getting things shipped and everything. I'm still nervous, and I was getting ready anyway. And I was going to do a good Kickstarter, and I was towards the end of the year, and I've been talking about this on the show for a while. I wanted to do a calendar, and I made the biggest fucking mistake. I asked my readers what they thought. I should have never done that, because the question is, should I do safe for work or not safe for work calendar? Right. And it split right down the middle. Half of them wanted safe for work. Half of them wanted not safe for work. By the way, the answer is safe for work because you can sell it in more places. That's the answer. I didn't need anyone to tell me that. That's the answer. Safe for work. It's the smarter play, right? One person, by the way, it's not this person's fault in case you're listening. One person had a brilliant idea. Why not both? It's a safe for work calendar on one side and a not safe for work on the other. And I actually figured out how to do it. I made a little mock-up on a piece on paper, stapled them together. Holy shit, this is possible. And I put that into my quote request from the printer that I was using. And needless to say, it came back $25 a unit because I was putting way more printing on this freaking thing. Yeah. And it was big because I wanted my art to be big and I want a calendar to be big. What's the use otherwise? And so that slowed me down. And then this is going to sound like a humble brag, but it's true. Then I got nominated for awards this summer, and I ended up going to the NCS, and I ended up going to the Ringos, and I was distracted by them and promoting different things involved with that. We did the live show at the NCS, and a bunch of time that I should, right there in the heart of summer, when I should have been finalizing that Kickstarter, I was doing all this crazy stuff.
Sure. You know what, though? But here's the thing is that, and this is important for people to hear that are earlier in their career, though. Brad had a misstep in terms of planning, and I've had missteps this past year in terms of planning, but you notice that we're both smiling and laughing about it because you have to be kind to yourself. This is a marathon, not a sprint. And so if Brad missed his Kickstarter deadline by 6 months, 12 months, it's not the end of the world. Laugh about it, pick up the pieces and do it again next year. And it is okay, you know?
My thought is there was one year I didn't take my Christmas decorations down until like February. And I don't know why. It was one of those things that there was always either the weather was shitty on the time that I had to do it, or I didn't want to do it on the other other times. And it was February. And somebody said, you still got your Christmas, you're late taking your Christmas decorations down. I said, no, I'm not. I'm early for next year. And that's how I look at this Kickstarter. I'm not late for this Kickstarter. I'm just early getting it out there for the first part of next year. I've got everything lined up. I'm taking that calendar right out because I don't need that aggravation anymore. I'm going to focus on the books. And by the way, we should talk about that too. So many Kickstarters go off the rails because I'm going to do this and then this, I'm going to do that, and then this add-on and this special offer and this. And sometimes I think you're better off just focusing on what is the thing. And I made that mistake. Well, okay, so I'm late for this year, but I'm going to be early for next year.
Yeah, and so putting a button on it, what you've done, Brad, is you declared organizational bankruptcy on last year's Kickstarter and shifted it over to next year's Kickstarter.
Yeah.
And there'll be new and different strategies for how you tackle it. And if life gets in the way, that's okay. Declare organizational bankruptcy again and try it again in 2025. We won't let that happen. But I do find the idea of organizational bankruptcy helpful for me in the sense that I'm allowing myself to be kind for any times that life got in the way, because there's always illness or family stuff or work stuff, or in Brad's case, being lauded by 2 of the biggest comics awards in America.
I know, by the way, I know how
quietly
dumb that
mentioned,
sounds.
I don't know if he mentioned that to anybody. Brad got award nominations.
One of which I won, but I know how dumb that is, but it was super.
It's not dumb.
I traveled.
You took time to live. God forbid you took time to live. That's why we're doing what we do, you know?
That's true. That's true. That's very true.
So anyway, I think as we come up on the shows where we're going to talk about 2023 and 2024, I'm getting excited because I like the idea of perfecting not only our comics abilities and our skills within the craft, but also trying to perfect the systems behind our day-to-day work. And organizational bankruptcy is one thing that I have come to love. Anyway, Brad, let us jump into the next question from Tyler Mann over at patreon.com/comiclab. And this says, hey guys, my last Kickstarter, I got overwhelmed with too many commission rewards. Oh, Brad, sound familiar to the point you were just making?
Yes,
to
it does.
To the point that I am considering not offering them this time around. What tips or suggestions do you have about offering additional rewards or add-ons for Kickstarters? So, Brad, I know this is actually kind of ironic given that we literally were just talking about this, but too much stuff offered so that a Kickstarter becomes overwhelming or doesn't get done or gets confuzzled. What are your thoughts on that?
Yep, I think this is just an outgrowth of what we've been talking about. Keep it simple, stupid, right? What's the Kickstarter for? Boom. Focus on that. What you have in the warehouse or in the storage area that you can throw into an add-on, done. And then let that Kickstarter stand on its own. You take a look around at a lot of Kickstarters that are going on and just pay attention to some of these. Just scroll through and take a look at a lot of these Kickstarters that are going for real big numbers, right? Real impressive numbers. Take a look at all of those stretch goals that they put in and add-ons and so on and so forth. And think to yourself, what is that doing to the overall health of that Kickstarter? Are those costs adding up? Are those going to be able to be incorporated into your Kickstarter? And remember, the whole point of a Kickstarter is to cover your costs. Right. And that means all of your costs. Somebody wrote an email not too long ago and said, well, should I incorporate the cost of doing the video? Yes, that's a cost that goes into the Kickstarter. Should I incorporate the cost of mailing or the time that it takes? I put a little bit of money in there to pay me for the time that I know I'm going to spend on doing the Kickstarter. I also put a little buffer in knowing that sometimes my math is bad and I'm going to need a little extra. The biggest problem you can have is to let that imposter syndrome get in your head and make you bring that goal down, right? So that it doesn't cover all of your costs because you think, well, at least I'll hit my goal. Right. Well, no, it's not about that. And it's not about getting a big number with a whole bunch of stretch goals and stuff. The idea, people have lost track of this. The idea of a Kickstarter is pre-orders for a book or a piece of merchandise. The whole idea is to generate enough funds that you can do a print run, some of which go to your Kickstarter backers as a pre-order, and a whole bunch of which, in fact, a larger number, best case scenario, you have now that you put into storage that you can sell at a retail level or a retail markup, if not actual retail, throughout the year. It's the whole idea of funding a book run. It's not about just getting the books to those Kickstarter backers. It's about getting those books and a whole bunch more you can sell throughout the year. And also, by the way, use that as an add-on or something that you can offer as reward packages for the next Kickstarter.
Yes.
You've got them ready to go, right? And you can have the knock-on effect then. And you can do that through BackerKit or Kickstarter itself. A lot of different ways, but that's what a Kickstarter is. It isn't that, I mean, the commissions is great because it helps you bump up that number. But fact of the matter is, if your book, again, Kickstarter being free market research, if this book on its own, without commissions, without add-ons and doodads and stretch goals and all this other bullshit, if your book isn't strong enough to reach that goal that allows you to print out those books to have enough left over to sell throughout the year, then it's good that you know that now and you can go on to the next thing.
Yeah, that's such a good answer that I don't even really want to add on to it. But I will say that in general, every decision that you make, let's not even isolate it down to Kickstarters. Like a career has to be about balance and about achievability. I've said this before on the podcast, but a career in comics, not just the ability to make comics, but a career in comics is the art of the possible. And yes, you could draw every page like Mobius, and guess what?
Yes.
You'd get 40 pages done by the end of the year. That's it. You wouldn't have much of anything. So a lot of cartoonists find a balance in what their output is and versus the let's just say it, quality. So we kind of say, like, I'm not drawing my best, but I'm drawing at my 92% level. And that's good enough to communicate the story in a super pleasing way that I'm happy with, the readers were happy with, and the page is out. And so, like, or look at it this way, in terms of what we're biting off. Is it more than we can chew? Because Brad has ideas that he has not actualized. I have comics ideas that I have not actualized. I find in my life, on an average week, I can do Sheldon, I can do Drive, I can record Comic Lab, I can take care of my family, and I can maybe work out. And those 5 things, that's kind of all I can do. You know what I mean? Like, do I have more ideas? You bet your bippy I have more ideas. I have like 3 more comics ideas in terms of titles that I would love to do. I know that Brad has more ideas that he would love to do, more projects that he would love to do. But it's really the art of the possible. And so this is okay that this has happened to you because it's a learning lesson. But basically, you overpromised from what was possible for these commissions, because probably your eyes got big in terms of the dollar signs, and that's okay, because you're like, this is a moment to actualize. I want to turn these readers into dollars, and I get it. I really do get that. But you also have to ask yourself, okay, if a commission takes me, I'm just going to pick a number, 4 hours, and I've promised to do 40 of these things, I've got to devote 140 hours. That's a full month of just doing commissions. Well, when am I going to do that? Am I going to divvy that up over the course of the year? Like, you have to literally get out a calendar, do the math. If I'm going to do these commissions, how long is the average one going to take? How many can I do in a week and not diminish from my overall workload? So it's about balance, and it's about achievability, and it's about the art of the possible. And I think that relates to our overall advice that we've said again and again.
Yeah, and just to tie it up, because I can anticipate the next question, and that is, how am I supposed to walk the potential backer and Kickstarter up the ladder if I don't have all of this stuff? And the answer is, if you don't have stuff in your storage area ready to go to build out rewards and stuff like that, you're limited to artist editions and commissions and stuff like that, then you have to add those judiciously, right? And put a limit on them based on what Dave just got done saying, and scale back that Kickstarter and keep it small. And if you do this one right, you'll have enough books left over for the next Kickstarter. Then you'll be able to use those books from Kickstarter 1 to build in rewards for Kickstarter 2. Right? But if you don't have that, then you don't have it. You can use some of these other things judiciously and limit them, but You can't offer something you don't have. It doesn't mean that you start printing up stickers and throwing them in. It doesn't mean you start printing up patches and buttons and pins and all this other stuff because you feel you need them, because those are all costs. Right? And you're shooting yourself in the foot. So the idea is to do your first Kickstarter well enough, smart enough, so that it leads into the second one and the third one and so on and so forth. And that means starting small and building up from there.
And I will say by the way, I super agree with Brad. I will offer one last bit of advice, and this is Capitalism 101. Yeah. If you find that you have too many commission requests, too many people that are waving dollars at you saying, I'd love commissions, instead of selling 40 commissions for $40, you need to realize that the demand is there. And when demand rises, so do prices. So reduce the number that you produce down to 8 commissions at $200 a pop. You will make the same amount of money as 40 commissions at $40 a pop, right? And you'll say, oh, but some of those people won't get commissions. Yeah, unfortunately, that's capitalism.
Exactly.
Your most ardent fans will be the ones paying $200 for a commission from you. Your hand will not be broken, and you'll make the same amount of money. That's also the art of the possible. You say to the other 32 people, I'm so sorry, this is the price of my commissions. The demand has gone up and I don't have enough time to do a bunch of them, and it's simple capitalism, but it works. Hey, if you're listening while you work, take a minute to stand and stretch.
And while you're doing that, we're going to tell you why you should join us on Patreon.
When you do, you're going to get hours and hours of podcasts that we recorded just for backers.
And exclusive Patreon posts that go even deeper on Comic Lab topics.
And access to our exclusive Discord server, which is a thriving community of professional cartoonists.
So you can support the show you love and get tons of actionable resources for your own cartooning.
And listen, if you can't swing a pledge this month, we get it. No worries.
Yeah, listen, you can still support the show by rating us wherever you get your podcasts.
Just leave a 5-star review and a few kind words.
That, along with mentions on social media, is incredibly helpful.
Now, everybody, let's talk comics.
Dave, I got an update on Mastodon. Are you ready for this?
Oh, is it it? Is it suddenly? Is it?
No, listen. Mastodon ain't quite as bad as I originally thought it was. Are you ready for this? You ready for this?
You know what? I appreciate a person who can change their mind with new data. So that's good to know.
I got to admit. So we were singing the praises of the Discord server of Comic Lab earlier today, and this started in the Comic Lab Discord server. Chris Halbach, who we both respect immensely for what he's been doing. It comes in the Comic Lab, very politely says, listen, I know Brad really hates it, but, it's not impossible to build an audience on Mastodon. And he pointed to a couple folks who were racking up very impressive number, clearly getting good engagement. And so, as anyone who's thoughtful and curious, I started looking at that and saying, okay, what are they doing that's different than what? In fact, one of the folks that was racking up good numbers is our friends from War and Peace, Jonathan and Elizabeth. We're doing great numbers on Mastodon. And so I started taking a look at it. Maybe what am I missing? Is it a content thing? Is it a quality thing? Is it a quantity thing? What's going on? And all of a sudden, something stuck out to me. And it was this. All the folks that were racking up good numbers that I could see were on one Mastodon server in particular. Now, taking a little pause. Mastodon's not like every other social media platform that you're used to, in that it's not just one thing. It's a whole bunch of different servers that are federated into one umbrella. They can all talk to each other. But the server that you choose, I think, and this is just a couple weeks in, but the server that you choose can have a big effect on your experience. Now, I was an early adopter for Mastodon, and I got in right away because I wanted to test it out, mainly for the show, so we'd have something to talk about. And at that time, my choices were very limited, and I got kind of shunted over to Socel.net, SOCEL.net. And it was
Is this like a server run by a guy named Gunter in southern Berlin? He's like, yeah, Brad, welcome to the server.
I'm kind of thinking it kind of was. It was advertised as being for artists and animators. It seemed like a good fit. And at that point, my understanding was it wasn't going to make that big of a difference. And on a macro level, it doesn't, but it kind of still does. Like it can affect who's seeing your stuff and whether you're getting that enough engagement that it gets outside of your own server. And so I was on Sokol.net. And I noticed everybody who's doing really well, Howlback, Warren Pease, some of these other folks were on Mastodon.social. So as a way to test out the theory, you can switch servers. And I said, well, I'm going to take Chris at his word. I'm going to switch servers. And I'm going to start posting like I post on all the others now, Blue Sky, Threads, Twitter, etc., Instagram, and so forth. I've got them all set up. Bing, bing, bing. And I got to tell you, within the first couple of weeks, I was getting markedly better engagement than I was getting on that first Mastodon instance. Now, part of it, Chris kind of called the shot a little bit because Chris has a huge audience. So the first time, he no sooner sees me posting and he starts boosting my post and basically showing it to his audience. Okay. And they immediately start following and engaging and everything. So I got a shot in the arm there. But even after he stopped doing that, my engagement was much better than it had been. And I'm telling you, I was counting.
Somewhat server dependent then.
That's what now listen, again, I'm only like 2 weeks into this experiment, so I'm not ready to say anything other than this. I've upgraded Mastodon from being a complete waste of time to right now, I'm putting it on the same level as Blue Sky and Threads. Now, that's not a compliment because I'm not seeing great stuff out of Blue Sky and Threads either. But I've had to elevate it in my esteem because I am now getting engagement, and that's happened ever since I switched to Mastodon Social. So if you, like me, were having this same problem, you may want to consider switching. I got a feeling what's going to happen is if what I'm saying is accurate, then everybody's going to go to Mastodon.social and it's not going to be federated anymore.
Yeah.
Everybody's got to go to that central place to get engagement. But in the meantime, I just have to say, I can't say Mastodon ain't it anymore. I'm elevating it to the same level as Blue Sky and Threads, which is to say, it's still not burning the bridge, or still not, I guess burning the bridge is the wrong idiom.
Still not lighting any fires, I guess. Yeah. Not lighting any fires, not setting the world on fire. There you go.
But it isn't dead on arrival like originally I was seeing.
Did Gunter email you to say he was sorry when you moved off his server?
Gunter was the one that was emailing me saying that he needed more money to run the server. That was one of the reasons I was so down on Mastodon, is because I kept getting these messages saying that we all need to chip in to make this server work, or else he wasn't going to be able to keep doing it. And I'm like, hey, if that's Mastodon, and I by the way, I still feel that way. If that's Mastodon, then it's going to have a real problem, because you know as well as I do, people are not, by and large, going to donate in large enough numbers to make that happen. And if you're going to do that, you might as well again spend money on the platforms that are established, like Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. Right. You know, if you're going to spend money, you might as well spend it on the ones that have the established platform, which I'm still not sold on doing anyway. Yeah. Gunter was a big reason that I got the hell out of there, because I kept getting these. You need to donate for my server costs.
Brad, I'm so sorry. The server's getting so expensive. It's quite cost prohibitive here.
Oh my God.
So that's interesting, because I have a lot of thoughts about that, but I don't want to bore people about it. But anyway, interesting to know that Mastodon can be worked into your system. I'm wondering if I should launch yet another social media thing, because in 2024, I'm going to be having 2 Kickstarters, one for Sheldon and one for Drive. And this will be my first round of Kickstarters in a very broken and splintered and rebuilding social media environment. And I will just be honest with all of you that I don't know how it's going to go. I don't know how I'm going to reach some of these fan bases, and whether or not they will be limited by whatever algorithms, screen or don't screen out Kickstarter links. I mean, I know Twitter had things that were built into the code when they started releasing that publicly, and so we'll see whether Threads and Blue Sky and Mastodon and all the other ones. But maybe I'll join. I join Mastodon.social, and we'll see. You'll see me on there, Brad, and trying it out.
Well, if you do join, that's the one to join. I will say that. I can confidently say that. Well,
that's basically giving a little bit of lie to the idea of a federated system, in the sense that yes, the federated system welcomes all the ideas in, but maybe by practice and in actual logistics, the messages a little bit get filtered to the bottom of the tank if they're not on the main server. So,
and I having said that, again, I don't want to go too far down that road, because I haven't been. I've just started taking it seriously again, and I still might be. You know that old story about the blind people, or they're blindfolded and they're each at a different point of the elephant, and they're describing what they think it is.
Yeah, snake, right? Or a trunk of a tree, or exactly.
I'm blindfolded looking at one side of an elephant.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
And it's knowing me, it's probably the wrong side. So I'm reserving my analysis. All I'm saying right now is that I can't keep trashing on it. It's not as bad as I thought it was, but there's still a lot of time to decide whether it's actually good.
Yeah. Yeah, I will say this. I noticed my Twitter in other news is continuing to fall in users. And I find myself with a tiny bit of schadenfreude about it. Not from my own unfortune in losing those readers, but I'm just happy that the whole platform's falling apart. Because I think the sooner it falls apart, the sooner a new buyer will come in and start it over again.
And speaking of Gunter, it seems like every time I open up Twitter, they're trying to push that freaking subscription service again.
They're
harder
desperate
and harder
for cash. They're desperate for. You can feel it that they're desperate for cash.
Yeah. And it's like, why would anybody try? I mean, speaking again as the guy that said, I'd consider $2 a month. When it comes down to that, I actually looked at it, and I had my finger on the button, and it came down to, do you want Elon Musk to have your credit card information? As weird as that is, I literally looked at that and I said, I don't trust this organization with my credit card. I use my credit card on a lot of different sites, but not Twitter. That's the one site. I can't think of another site that I trust as little as Twitter.
It's unfortunate, because it's keeping me from buying a electric car, because really the 800-pound gorilla in that market is Tesla, but I just don't want to give the dude my money. So anyway, all right, so that's a separate matter entirely. But I want to say, though, that Brad described it really well in terms of trying to describe an elephant in terms of what the social media landscape is. The truth is, all of us have very individual and very weird, because the whole platforms are individual and weird right now. Nothing is set in stone. They're all changing week by week. Their fortunes are rising or falling. And so all you can do, and I think Brad's right about this, is play the odds and keep posting to 4 or 5 different server or platforms and seeing which one takes off in time, and hoping that in 2024, Dave's 2 Kickstarters can find traction with one of those platforms and get some backers over there. Anyway, all right, well, let us jump into the next topic, Brad. And this comes in from Cameron Davis over at patreon.com/comiclab. Cameron writes, we're starting to publish a long-form science fiction humor comic. I'm listening. I'm very intrigued.
Long-form science fiction humor. Okay.
Long-form, everything I like. All right. We're starting to publish a long-form science fiction humor comic soon, and have a question about posting updates. My plan was to post 2 or 3 pages of the story at a time each week, so there's a satisfying amount of content with each update. However, should the pages be posted separately to the site so the comic size is uniform, or should all the pages be stuck together in one update? So, Brad, this is a science fiction long-form comic strip, but you've been doing a long-form comic for ages and ages, so can very easily talk about this. Should they post Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 3 individual pages during the week, or should they do one huge one on Wednesday that's 3 pages tall on the website and, formatted to 1,000 individual panels for mobile? What are your thoughts on this?
Aha. You just stumbled into it. Because here's the deal. And speaking about websites and our need to think outside of the box, Cameron assumes that he's got to post this thing for the desktop version of his site as a full page, because that's the way webcomics have been since the dawn of time, or since 2000, whichever comes first. Right. He assumes that since that's the webcomics desktop version of the site that he grew up with, that he's got to do that. The problem is he doesn't have to do that. He doesn't have to do the desktop version of his site in a full page format. He can choose to set up the desktop version of his website exactly the same as the mobile version of his website,
right,
and do it all in a vertical scroll. In other words, the desktop version of his website could look just like Webtoons. Right. He can mimic that delivery formula that works very well, and it's going to work just as well on desktop as it is for mobile. So my answer to Cameron is, one of your options is, if this is actually the case, that sometimes you're presenting one page, sometimes you're presenting 3 pages worth of stuff, the way that you get around that is to present both versions, desktop and mobile, of your website in a vertical scroll. But there's probably other ways of looking at it.
Well, I don't disagree with you. I think that's true. Webtoons has shown us that a super long vertical scroll is actually very satisfying for a lot of people, and that's a great way to do it. And I don't disagree with that. In fact, if you go to drivecomic.com right now and take your browser window on a desktop and shrink it so that it is thinner, you'll see the normal Drive comic page reformat to individual panels. So you can see how I kind of do both, as Brad just described. Yeah. But to Brad's point, I could do it where you never see the page until it gets to print. You'll only see the vertical scrolls. That's a totally valid option.
Yeah.
I do want to talk about one thing that I just want to speak to in terms of your question, which is you said you want to post 3 pages because that is a satisfying update. Yeah. And you said there's a satisfying amount of content with each update, which makes it sound like you're posting all 3 pages at once. That's fine, but I want to remind you that a great way to write for long form is each page is a satisfying ending on some way, shape, or form. It is either a moment of action, it's a punchline, it's an insight into a character, it's a moment of pivoting where the character finds a new revelation. It's a moment of excitement for the reader, such that when they're in book format, the pages turn themselves. They want to know what's going on next, right?
Yeah.
So I just want to speak to the fact that you said writing 3 pages so that it's a satisfying update, where that sounds like, hey, the meal wasn't very good, but there was a lot of it, so they felt satisfied.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You can be very satisfied with 1 page. As Brad has shown, you can be very satisfied with half page.
Right.
And I think Brad's marriage speaks to that too. You can find a lot of satisfaction with far less than you would think. Take it from my
wife. You can get a lot of satisfaction from very little.
You landed that joke so much better than I did. Ah, darn it. I stepped all over myself trying to get to that joke. See, this is why I don't work blue, because when I do, I mess it up. I don't.
I know. Yeah, you seized right up. I can see it. I can see it. It's like, oh,
exactly,
God.
Exactly. So anyway, Cameron, I want to speak to the fact that no argument, 3 pages, that's amazing. That's great. Your readers are going to love it. Yeah. But I hope you're writing each page with sort of a satisfying finish, a punch, a push on each ending so that the pages turn themselves when they're reading. Am I wrong to think that, Brad, or noticing that in his question?
No. We often give the advice that you post you don't think about the page, you think about the update, and each update has to be significant, right? We've said that in the past. And I could see 2 pages. I could see a 2-page chunk.
Sure.
Once we get to 3 and 4, then it's possible, it's doable. I could see a world in which that happens. It starts to make me wonder if your writing doesn't need to be improved. 3 is getting. Think about it. If nothing exciting is happening for 2 pages in a row,
that's true.
Until you get to the end of the 3rd page, there'd better be some really, there can't be anything significant happening because it's not significant enough for you to end the update on it. So even though it's possible, I leave it open that it's possible. I'm being very open-minded today on Mastodon, on Mastodon, but still, I'm leaving it open that this could be the case. But I think if you're starting to post 3 and 4 pages at a time for an update, you're telling yourself, I'm not doing a good job of staying interesting. My writing needs to be improved. I need to make something sharper happen here, and I really encourage you maybe to get some test readers. But you're in a situation right now where you haven't launched this yet. I'd get some test readers. Again, I'm going to go back to the critique channel on Discord. Put your stuff up there, not in I made this, where it's all about head pats. You're right. Hey, I made this. Well, everybody's supposed to come in and say, hey, great job, you made this, which is great. We need that too. Put it in the critique channel and tell people to be vicious. Give you the absolute truth. Time to know it is now, before you launch it. Put it in that critique channel and ask for real solid response. How is this story reading? You might find out that your hunch is true and that reading needs to be the writing needs to be sharpened up.
Yeah, I think Brad's very right there. I mean, listen, I've been proven wrong. In fact, there are whole titles of Fantagraphic books that say you can do nothing for 3 pages and then finally have something exciting happen and make a career out of it. So I won't say that it's not possible, but I will say it's not very fun for a reader to have to earn it after 3 pages of a character looking out a window and then finally on the 3rd page something happens. So I'm with Brad on that, is that you might want to look at the way you're writing, the pace that you're writing in terms of something happening.
And it's one thing for a Fantagraphics book that's marketed to be a book that's sold as a book. It's another thing to be something that's supposed to build a readership on the web. Yeah. Those are 2 completely different things.
That's a really good point. And I know my joke was a little snide, but yes, that's really good, because with a book, you're willing to forgive and in fact enjoy very different paces than you would online.
Yes, you're reading it in longer chunks.
Yeah. You're probably sitting on your couch on a Sunday morning and you have some coffee and you're very willing to do 20 pages to enjoy a mood of a scene. And that's very different than what would be allowable online. So you're
trying to build an audience online.
I think that's right. I also want to say that as my final note, I just want to say that you are starting this process. And I might want to say to you that starting with 3 pages a week is not a given. You could start with 2 pages a week, with 1 page a week, because if you find that 2 pages, 1 page is very doable, then sure, jump up to 3 pages. You're going to feel a little bit deflated and a little bit defeated if you get to the end of year 1 and you're like, I don't know if we can keep this 3 page a week schedule. Like, you might want to start with a little bit more of the art of the possible, if you remember that from earlier in the show, and say, I'm going to start with 1 page a week, 2 page a week, see how we do, see how our pace is over not just this week or this month, but this 6 months, this 12 months, this 18 months, see how we do, like in a day-to-day life where one of us is going to have a cold, one of us is going to have a family emergency, one of us is going to have a water leak in the house that we have to deal with, right? That kind of stuff comes up, but your comics schedule, your comics output has to be an achievable and maintainable art of the possible. So I just might want to warn you towards starting with 1 or 2 pages.
Think about how often that happens throughout life, right? You can only do what you can do. That's why this show is only an hour long, is that we can't do any more than that, because we know if we did, you guys would get tired of our voices and you'd turn us off anyway. So when it gets to be about this part of the show, that's when I pull out this little piece of paper and say that you've been listening to Comic Lab, the show about making comics and making a living from comics.
Your hosts have been my friend Brad, enemy of Gunter, but editor of webcomics.com and the creator of Evil Inc. at evilcomic.com.
And my close personal friend, Dave Kellett, the co-director of the comics documentary Stripped and the cartoonist of Sheldon at sheldoncomics.com and Drive Comic at drivecomic.com. Boy, oh boy.
Oh boy, landed that plane. The Comic Lab theme song is used with permission from Andy Creighton at theworldrecord.net, and this episode was edited by the ever wonderful Matt Woodard of Woodsong Productions over at www.woodsong.media.
If you love Comic Lab, and we know that you do, take a couple seconds and rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get a chance to put those 5 stars together. If that happens and you leave us a kind word or two, you may hear your review featured on a future episode like I'm about to do right now. This comes in from Apple Podcasts, and it says, "Feet first, eggs in a basket, draw." As a cartoonist myself, I have learned to seek the love of others have for cartooning and comics that goes beyond the norm. The people that have dived in feet first to the dark chasm, not knowing what lies at the bottom. The people that put all their eggs in one basket and then jammed in some more despite the cracks. These are my people. Brad and Dave are those people. Thanks for a fun and insightful podcast, Brad and Dave.
Hey, that's fantastic to hear. I like the formatting of that write-up too, by the way. That was really creative.
Some great writing. Hell yes.
Yeah, that was great. And I will say Comic Lab is made possible by your support on patreon.com/comiclab. So I will go ahead and say that twice. Patreon.com/just a few euros, and we can keep the server running for another month. So if you have just a couple euros in your pocket, that would be so helpful.
You just wait. Jonathan and Elizabeth are gonna get even with us one of these days for doing that. They're gonna say, "Come on over to Germany, Brad and Dave," and then they're gonna get us there and then bop us in the head with a bratwurst or something. What if people treated us the way we treated plumbers? Like, could you imagine is you're sitting there writing at your desk and somebody comes in and hovers and starts telling you, asking you questions about why you're using the pen you're using, or whether you shouldn't try to use a different T-square, or have you thought about how you're doing that word balloon? Could you imagine if we treated people the way we treat plumbers?
I'm sitting there cartooning, and a nervous guy comes in and goes, "Hi, I brought you a bowl of water."
The damnedest thing is most cartoonists I know would drink it.